two of the optimists were putting out all the chairs, and that was Stephen and Jackie. We're hoping there might be a few more, but there's obviously better things on in the town tonight. What we want to do is just run through with you what's in the latest version of our business plan. And we're going to start off, look at the strategic context, and then the council, who Ian and Isabella with us tonight, are going to go through what's in the council's local housing strategy. We're going to look at, John's going to do keeping rents affordable. John will look at investing in their home, and then there's an opportunity for questions at the end, if there are any. And the event has been live streamed, but Stephen's keeping the camera pointed that way, I think, for the presentations. The vision statement that the board have set is to provide good quality and affordable homes and to secure consistent and excellent housing services throughout the Outer Hebrides. And one of the things that we did was look at how can we condense that into something short that says what we're about. And at the last board meeting, there was a couple of choices went up that had come from the staff, and this is what the board chose: making our house your home. So that's a strapline that we're going to have. The other thing we looked at was we had 6 core values. We wanted to have one with 5 supporting values, and the core value that the board chose was integrity, which is honouring our commitments that we make to tenants and to build trust, and our decision-making processes are open and transparent. So that will be on our communication and in our business plan. Reminder of what our strategic objectives are. The board set 7. Placing tenants at the centre of everything we do, making sure we're investing in a sustainable way in tenants' homes, delivering continuous improvement over time, providing efficient, effective housing services of the highest quality whilst keeping rents affordable, being a good employer that attracts and retains high-quality staff, delivering value for money, and making the biggest impact on the economic well-being of the communities throughout the Outer Hebrides that our resources will allow. We do that in the context of the government's objectives, and what they want for Scotland is a wealthier, fairer, smarter, healthier, safer, stronger and greener Scotland. So that's the context that both the local authority and ourselves are delivering under. This is what's being reviewed at the moment, the Council's local housing strategy, which then sets the context for us about where we're going to develop and build new homes. And we're all operating under what's going to happen with Brexit. So everybody, all the businesses, not just in the Outer Hebrides, but throughout the UK, are wondering what's going to happen and what impact is that going to have on our ability to deliver our services. We operate in a regulatory environment. We're regulated by the Scottish Housing Regulator. So we have to make sure that we comply with their standards in order for us to retain the status of being a registered social landlord. And some of the requirements are, particularly delivering information to them, can be quite onerous and take up quite a bit of time, but it's necessary. Our funder is the Royal Bank, and they also place requirements on us for information, but also on how we use our money. And they have placed on us a covenant that says, as long as you deliver this covenant every year, we will allow you to borrow up to £15 million. So that's the facility that we have in place in order for us to deliver the strategic objectives of the partnership. The operating environment we have, and Don will speak more about this later on, is rent affordability. We've got to bear that in mind. Right to buy is ending, so where at the moment some of our stock is going down through right to buy, and we've been replenishing that with new build, that's going to stop once right to buy ends. And if we keep building new houses, our stock is going to go up. And you only want to keep increasing your stock if you've got a demand. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to keep building new properties. So it's balancing all of that. Pressure on repairs budgets over the last couple of years. And the big one for everybody again is the change in demographics and how that affects our ability to provide services. One of the phrases, we've spoken about it here a number of times, that we've heard the leader and a number of other people saying is that, but we can't keep doing things the same way. And somebody very wise a long time ago said that you can't expect to put, if you put new wine into old wineskins, they're just going to burst. So we can't expect to try to do something new in using old methodologies. And that's a challenge for all of us. We've spoken about it, we know it's a thing we need to do, but we actually now have to start trying to find new ways of doing it. So we've got to ask ourselves the questions, are we doing the right things? And are we doing things the right way? And making changes where we need to make changes. And we need to make sure that we're doing them at an affordable price. So that's the challenge that we have to deliver within the business plan. Looking at what we're doing and making sure that we are finding the right way of doing it. But we've also got to assess the risks and making sure, because none of us want to be living in a home that's at risk. There's something about a home that it's our place of safety, so we don't want to be doing something in our service delivery that is going to put our tenants' homes at risk. So the board need to assess the risks of what they're wanting to do within a challenging environment, and that's the one that has hit the headlines for the past 6 months, because it is about building for future generations. It's not just about making sure we're okay now, it's about making sure that what we do, all of us, the council, the health board, ourselves, that we're doing something that is going to provide a foundation for future generations. One of the ways we can do that is through innovation, and just this week there was an article about Blackwood Housing. They're setting the standards in terms of innovation for the tenants that they have, and they've actually developed their own technology, smart technology, for the properties that they have, where they're providing mainly for disabled folk. So we want to learn from people who are at the forefront of using innovative technology, but we don't want to just assume that all the innovation needs to come from somebody else. And I think particularly with construction, it's an opportunity for us to see what can we do with innovation to make a difference in our community. So we are looking to those who are delivering those services to come up with different ways to help us provide the kind of houses that we need and where there's a demand. Because we want to make sure that we do deliver the mission, which is making our houses a home for our tenants. So I'm now going to hand over to Council, and they're going to tell you what they're looking to achieve. I suppose that you are already after it.
Misjudged the audience a wee bit, and really bit teaching Granny just a bit about what an LHS is and so on, but we shall see. First of all, thank you for inviting us along to just give our housing strategy consultation a wee block tonight. As Dina said, the current strategy ended at the end of 2016, and we're in the throes of preparing a 2017 to 22 strategy. We hope it will encourage some people tonight to give us a bit of feedback on the proposals, but we also hope that it will show that the activities that you include in your business plan don't just sit in isolation, but they actually form part of a much bigger picture, and they do influence what happens in the Outer Hebrides housing system as a whole. First of all, why do we do a new NHS? Well, it's a statutory duty for all local authorities, and Corla is still the Strategic Housing Authority after stock transfer. The document provides strategic direction to tackle housing need and demand. It informs investment in housing need. It has a lifespan of 5 years and should be reviewed regularly. When we started to look at what we wanted to do in 2017-22, we reviewed the current the last housing strategy, looked at the successes and the failures of that and what still needed to be moved on. We've looked at national housing policy and our statutory duties. we've done a housing need and demand assessment, which is a statutory requirement to provide the evidence base for our LHS. We had a private sector house condition survey done in the autumn of last year to update our information on that, because obviously the housing strategy covers all housing tenures, not just affordable housing. Our other major considerations are what is going into the local development plan, which is all about land use, and that is currently being renewed as well. So the timing is good, that we're all in sync. And the other huge consideration that we want this LHS to reflect, if we can, is the initiatives to address the population and migration problems that we have. 4 key themes have been identified through looking at these various evidence bases, and that is housing quality, supply, homelessness and independent living. Each of them will have a number of actions attached, which there are some suggested actions out in the consultation document. They'll be refined when we've gone through all of the responses that we have. And obviously, as the Col is no longer a landlord and HHP is the only mainstream housing association on the islands, we're dependent on HHP to help us achieve a lot of these themes, particularly in relation to affordable housing. So I'm going to hand over to Ian to talk a little bit about the figures that have come out of our housing need and demand assessment. That, as I say, is the evidence base which Scottish Government have to appraise as being robust and credible before we can actually submit our LHS to them. It provides the bottom line, if you like, of the new housing need that we're going to require over the next few years, and Ian will talk us through some of that.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again. Just add to my thanks to Leslie Gale about inviting us along. I appreciate that. As I mentioned, we're going through a consultation process ourselves just now, so any chance we get to go and talk about the NHS is most welcome. I thought it would be useful to have a wee talk tonight about one particular aspect of the new NHS, and that's really about theme 2, looking at the supply of new housing on the island. As I mentioned yourselves, the important role HSP plays in delivering affordable housing to the islands, but that theme also looks at the wider provision of housing in the islands, private sector housing, the private rented sector, and the various initiatives, organisations the Scottish Government have to develop houses through rural housing funds and so on and so forth. I'm noticing Donna in the audience with Teague, obviously the role of Teague do as well in providing housing opportunities to the island. So they're all very important. All the providers of new housing they do a fantastic job. It's hard work, it's difficult, you've got to find land, you've got to find money to deliver these houses, and it's also a challenge, and it certainly makes our life easier when we've got good partners like HSP and Teague to work with. But before we start building houses, we've got to know how many houses we need. So one of the key aspects of the local housing strategy is trying to work out an estimate of how many houses we're going to need in the future. In the past, there was a very haphazard way of doing it. Every council had their own way of doing it, mostly involved employing expensive consultants, costing a fortune at the ages and ages. But thankfully, the Scottish Government have now devised a new model that every council can use for free. It's easy to use, it's all based around a software model, and we've been working on that for the last year or two, 18 months, to try out various scenarios of how many houses we think we need. So, saved a fortune in consultants fees by using this model. It's cost us a bit more blood, sweat and tears and stress and strain, but we'll get it there. It's basically an Excel, a very posh Excel spreadsheet, and within that you can set a range of scenarios. You can run a range of scenarios using a range of criteria, and it looks at some background information of the Western Isles. It can be set up for any council area in Scotland, so we can look and see what's on the Edinburgh side of things, or Orkney or Shetland. So it's quite handy to get comparisons with other parts of the country. But for the Outer Hebrides, there's 5 main criteria that you can play around with to try and get some figures. The first one's household formation, and that's looking at the way households are created on the islands and how many are going to be formed in years to come. We know the population trend is looking quite bleak. Population numbers go down quite sharply. Strangely enough, household formation is going down. That's largely down to a lot of single elderly people remaining in their homes, and more people want to live on their own when they're youngsters. So we can tweak these figures about to get different scenarios. The second thing we can take into account is existing need, and again we've got a few options we can look at. We can look at a range of figures around homelessness on the islands, but the really useful one we do use is again from yourselves, it's your own waiting lists. We can plug that information into the model and that can give some useful outputs. We also look at the income on the island as well, the town work guide, the type of how healthy the economy is in terms of the household income and what people can afford in terms of rent or if they can afford to buy a house. The fourth area we look at is the housing market, trying to check out and see how the housing projects are going, what's the average selling price, how quickly houses are selling, what the average turnaround time is, and if there's any changes from one part of the island to the next. And the fifth one we can play about with is tenure preference. We can run a model assuming or estimate that 90% of people will want to buy a house or get tweaked to have 30% want an HSP house or 20% want shared equity and so on and so forth. So we've run nearly 100 different models over the last year or so. The stage we're at just now, we've narrowed that down to 4 models that we'll look at in more detail. We submitted these to the Scottish Government and they're currently in the process of assessing that, and we hope we'll get feedback in the next few weeks about that. So the actual outputs from that, that's looking at the number of houses we think we're going to need in years to come. So the model we ran using your own waiting list, which is about 430 people on it at the time. When you run that through the model, that's coming out with the following figures. It's estimating that we need 34 new affordable houses every year, and that's for a 5-year period. It's estimating that there'll be 15 households will be able to afford below market rent. That's rent just under the threshold of the private rented sector. The model estimates around about 13 people will go for private rented accommodation and 32 people will buy a property on the open market. So that's about 1994 houses that needed a year to meet the housing need on the island at the moment. So once the Scottish Government have assessed that and they think the figures are robust and credible, they'll tell us that and we can move on to the next stage. And the next stage is really about consulting with our partners. Although the models give us some figures, that's not the end of the story. We have to take into account a whole range of other things as well to come up with what's called a housing supply target. And the housing supply target is more or less focused on affordable housing, social housing, for rent or for first-time buyers through shared equity. And in the NHS, we'll be setting a national target. It could be looking at 40 houses or 20 houses, or, depending on the discussion leads us. But we've got to take into account a range of things. We've got to take into account the views of yourselves as a main landlord in the islands. We want to take into account of things like economic regeneration of the islands as well. So obviously, new build housing does have a good impact on the economy. Not only does it meet the housing need, it's also good for the local building industries as well. And as we mentioned, the population migration seminar last year, that's a big concern for the council. We know there's a drop in our population in years to come, and we're looking at see some way we can stop that by retaining people on the island, but also getting more people moving to the island. And housing is going to be a key part of that. Not just social housing, but any type of housing on the island. So once we get the house supply target, the other thing we're looking at is where to build these actual houses. Again, we work very closely with HSP in a document called the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. And that sets out the number of houses we'll be building over a 5-year period. It also sets out where these houses are likely to be built and how many and what type of houses. So we've got an initial draft of that has been submitted to the Scottish Government, and again, we've done that in consultation with HSP. We're expecting feedback from that quite quickly. But once we get the NHS to the next stage, we'll be able to look at that in more detail and actually pinpoint where the new houses will be. So at the moment, we're looking at around about 34 houses a year for the next couple of years anyway. But even that's got its challenges. I mean, it's on paper, when you're looking at these figures, you think, brilliant, yeah, that'll be all done in the next 3 years. But as we've found, every site we look at has got its challenges as well. There could be title challenges, there could be access challenges to a road into a site, and there could be issues about services, electric, water, and so on and so forth. So it's a difficult process to go through, but we're quite fortunate having a good partner like yourselves, HSP, the council to deliver that aspect of the strategy. So we will no doubt be back in touch with yourselves in the future as we come to the next stage of the NHS and the development of that, and we're working very closely with your officers and staff in delivering that. So thanks for giving us the time to talk about that. As I mentioned, we go through a consultation period. Any thoughts or desires you'd like to see factored into the NHS, please let us know. We'd rather go more reaching out to be forward. Finally, thanks once again to yourselves as an organisation for the role you play in helping us meet the needs of the area. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, good evening everyone, and thanks Ian for your words there. I'm going to spend the next 5-10 minutes just to go through what do rents pay for, why do we need to keep them affordable, and in terms of the rest of Scotland, how do HHP rents compare. So, yes. So, it would be a very, very big list to tell you everything that the rents actually pay for. But what I've tried to do in this pie chart is to graphically represent, in terms of the 17-18 budget, where we plan to spend the monies gathered in terms of rent. So you can see there that we have a significant amount of repairs and maintenance planned of close to 2 million. We've got investment, so that's a cyclical investment in existing properties, whether that be heating, new kitchens, roofing, rough casting, whatever that might be. We plan to spend approximately 4.1 million over the course of the next fiscal year, and by far and away the biggest is the new build development of 5.1 million that we planned in 17-18. For 17-18, the rents have been set at RPI plus 1, so that's a 3.2% increase year on year. Obviously, when we set the rents, affordability is key, and we try to keep rents as low as we can, but we need to make sure that we meet our financial obligations and obviously deliver what we have in terms of an investment in the development plan. And I think John will go into that in some more detail later. One thing we need to do over the course of the next fiscal year as well is we need to look at our existing rent structures, and the intention is that over the course of the next year we'll develop a rent guarantee that will bring out to consultation with the tenant groups. But in general, HHP are critical in supporting the local supply chain, and we are a service provider, so when you don't see the service that we provide here in the pie chart, because we're not quantifying the service that we are providing from our internal resources, that is obviously pivotal and probably included within the management costs. If we move on to the next slide, and this is just why do we need to keep the rents affordable? We have a significantly higher level of cost of living in the Isle of Lewis, specifically across most rural areas. The cost of living is heightened, but in the Western Isles we have an issue, and that's highlighted by the number of households that are in fuel poverty, where 10% of their disposable income is spent on heating of homes. So these are things that we need to keep in mind when we're setting our rent. And the next two items there, it doesn't make any sense for us to have unaffordable rents. Unaffordable rents lead to higher arrears, which reduce the level of rents that we collect, and ultimately reduce the level of monies we have available to meet the investment plan, the development plan, and ultimately to meet our financial covenants. It's something that we need to look at. Likewise, if we have unaffordable rents, we're going to see an increase in the level of voids, which will in turn have an impact on the valuation of our stock, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. Affordability is a very, very tricky one, because we always have to keep in mind that affordability for tenants is key. However, we also have to offset that with the legal, the regulatory and the financial obligations that we have. Ian's mentioned the SHIP. We have to work with the council to develop and provide the houses that are identified through that piece of work. And obviously, we can only do that with having a regular rental income, and we will only have that with an affordable weekly rent. And finally, just to close, I thought it would be quite good just to show where HHP are when we compare ourselves against our peers. So the 6 associations that we've linked there are geographically similar to HHP. You've got Lochage and Skye, you've got Orkney, you've got Alban, you've got Lochaber, and you've got Chadden and Shetland. Now you can see there that if we look at our rents on a descending scale, sorry, on an ascending scale, we are number 1. We have the lowest rent out of those 6 RSLs. That's based on 2015-16 data from the ARC. So I think that's reassuring. We try as much as we can to keep our rents as low as we can, and I think that's evidence there. And if you look at the wider context of all the RSLs across Scotland, there's approximately 160 of those. We are in the top 25% there as well. So rent affordability is certainly key. I think it's something that we have demonstrated that we try to strive to get. I think I'll now hand over to John.
Okay, excellent. Okay, just pick up on some of the issues I think Ian and Isabel and Donald are also talking about. But first, maybe always useful to go back and look at how tenants are perceiving services and what that looks like. Just on a couple of issues, on the left-hand side there, the repair satisfaction figures for the year to date are shown there. That's based on a sample of 311 responses, which is about 10% of repairs that we carry out. So you can see there about 94% of tenants are satisfied with repair work that's been carried out. On the other side, investment, which is the major works, probably a higher response rate there of about 40%, but again 97% of tenants are satisfied with the works being carried out. And put in just for reference, the last major scientific tenant survey that we did in 2015, so you know it looks from there as if satisfaction is continuing to increase, and again in 2015 it had been significantly better than previous surveys we carried out. In terms of investment programme, down the left hand side there, that's the kind of major elements of the investment programme that we carry out. So I'm not intending to go through this in any detail. We have a 5-year investment programme at the moment. We're going into the 3rd year of that. We've delivered everything that we've said we would deliver, and in fact probably a bit ahead of where we said we would be. We deliver this through a framework contract, which is all made up of local contractors. So these works are all being carried out by local contractors, and it's money into local jobs, local economy. And the number of houses at the bottom there, you can see that somewhere around 25 to 30% of our houses are getting some investment year on year. Just some of the key issues in terms of the year coming up. There's an investment programme of 4.1 million, and about 2 million of that is focusing on heating and insulation. And a lot of that is aim to reduce the levels of fuel poverty amongst our tenants and to try and put more money into their pockets, which again has spin-off impacts for local economy and money that they can then spend locally. But as well as the £4 million investment programme, we're also spending, as Donald said, another almost £2 million on repairs and maintenance. So between these two elements of work, there's £6 million each year being spent and being invested in houses. And in the 2 years beyond that, there's 4.6 million planned for 18-19, another 4.8 million planned for 19-20. So we're continuing to invest at a very high level into tenants' homes. Just moving on to new build, I think the figure there should be 5.1 million actually in the first line. Next year we can spend 5.1 million on new build. So that's 50 new houses in Melbourne, hopefully going to go on site in March, and there's another 24, I think it is, coming off site in March or April. So major investment going on there. We're also trying to progress 2 sites in Tarbert, which should deliver about 12 flats there, and we're also progressing sites in Barra and at Cameron Terrace, which if they come off will deliver another 14 houses during next financial year. And just summing some of that up, when HHP were set up, the projection was to build 275 houses in the first 10 years. That's been way overachieved, so almost 400 houses will have been delivered by end of March. We're planning, in line with what Ian was saying, we've built into business plan at the moment, provision to build almost 300 houses between now and 2021-22, and that equates to 45 million spent into the local economy, of which our contribution directly is about 11 million, and the rest being made up by Scottish Government and by the COLA. I think the critical issue in all of that, these houses are built into plans, but there's, I think, some significant discussion still to be had as the NHS is put together about what we're building, who we're building for, what we're trying to achieve, at where we're going to deliver these homes, and Dean has mapped out the challenges facing us in that context. But there's an opportunity, I think, through the investment that is available to actually make a real difference and to do things differently and to try and arrest the population decline challenges that are facing us. So I'll finish there.
Thanks, John. Okay. Any questions? Thanks for a chance to ask them. You're amongst friends. For now, anyway.
How are we picking up the environmental side of the projection that you have on building the houses as such? Because when you look at the investment plan, when you look at the financial side and that, it is kind of focusing in on the housing, etc. But what's been missed out of the equation, if we take Mackenzie Estate as such, is the costs on the environmental side. How is that going to be picked up the next couple of years as such? Because it's something that's missing from the equation.
Who do you want to answer that?
Whoever can.
Yeah. Okay. We've obviously had several conversations, I guess, about this, and I suppose in terms of Mackenzie Farm, where it's been developed incrementally, I guess there's been lessons learned over that development period, and hopefully some of these have been put into practice in terms of the 50 house development that's coming off at the moment. There's always a tension though between trying to control costs and meeting aspirations. So we always need to try and balance these off. And some of this is as well, it's about agencies working together. So some of it's about obviously what we do, but it's also about what roads are looking for, or what cleansing are looking for, and that we work with these services as well. But ultimately, yes, it has to be about not just houses but good places for people to live in, and that's what we're trying to deliver. It's not necessarily that we always get it right, but hopefully we learn by what we've got wrong over the last couple of years.
Well, I pick it up, Dean, on the basis, I don't think it's the aspect of getting it wrong, John, or that. It's more the aspect of getting the council and HHP to make the government more aware that they have to give you extra resources for that area, because you're not getting finance in regards to the environment. And though we can work with partners on that, within the equation and within the plan that you've got to invest in the bigger areas over the next kind of 5-10 years, we need to try and access some of that finance from Scottish Government to help partners, because it's not it's not a blame in any way on the council or HHP. From my point of view as a local member, it's more that the government and those that are giving money are not giving you the additional to add to your investment programme within that area of the environmental side, from play right through, etc. And it's a hard challenge, but it's something that we have to kind of make them more aware that within the equations, when they give money for the new housing, there's got to be a percentage given for the environmental side, because the council don't have it, HHP don't have it, and even getting one or two partners together, they're struggling as such. It's not within the equation, and it's something we should make them aware of.
Yeah, I think we are doing that, and I think they've been pretty open to the additional costs that there are in the islands in developing houses. But the Scottish Government do have benchmarks as well, and they have increased these recently, but there's always going to be a bit of that constraint, and like I was saying, that balance between cost and meeting aspirations. But I think also some of the concern is about revenue costs going forward, so providing open space and play areas and these kind of things come with a long-term revenue requirement as well, and that's sometimes a more difficult one to deal with.
Thank you for that, and can I finally say, Dean, on the basis that we've done our own kind of, if you like to put it, investigation survey in regards to Mackenzie State, and it's about at 98% people down there very happy in the quality of housing, the aspect of it and that, and as you say, just to pick up one or 2 points on the environmental side. So thank you very much indeed to the council and to HHP for that, because that's what the tenants are saying to the local association and to me as a local member. So that's very positive. Thank you.
That's good. Thanks, Charlie. Anybody else got any questions or comments? No? Jane, have you got anything you want to ask?
There hasn't been any feedback from tenants by tonight's meeting. So.
Yeah, well, I think I've been out at a number of meetings with tenants, and the key issues are what John was talking about, so making sure that we're keeping the rates affordable but delivering the level of service. So I think that's certainly been fed back. And just to pick up on what John said, I think that is always going to be the tension about what is more important. And you do want to be able to leave as much money in their pockets to deal with the likes of their fuel and the rest of it. So it's a challenge that I think every service provider is facing. And we're very aware too of the pressures of the council are under, not just here but throughout Scotland, and having to continue to deliver services, more demands on it and with less funds. So I think the important thing is that we are in this together, and that we see that we're in this together. It's not a case of, well, that's the council's responsibility or our responsibility of the health boards, but we can achieve an awful lot more if we recognise where we can help each other. And I think that's, if there's any change going forward, I think that's where the biggest change has to take place, is that we see, all of us see ourselves as partners for the Outer Hebrides, and to make sure that we do build for future generations, rather than trying to protect and preserve our own little domain or environment. And that's not going to be easy, but then anything worthwhile is going to take a long time, and everything worthwhile always starts with the first step. So
you mentioned about the housing need at the moment, I mean 94 house. Is that an average over the 5 years of the LHS, and it is, would that be updated every so often as different factors would be fed into the strategy?
Yeah, the model comes up with a figure to enable us to develop it in more detail. It's the Scottish Government are very keen, and councils take this approach to get a figure, and that, you're right, it covers a 5-year period, so that figure there, the 94, would be
30 years.
For 5 years. The model also works what we need in years 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 and so on and so forth. But the further away you get, the less realistic it becomes. But the first 5 years are the most important, and that ties in with 5 years in the NHS. But I mentioned this thing called the housing supply target. That's really the chance for councils and their partners to come up with a figure that's more realistic than the model, taking into account things like the local environment, the local economy and things like that. So the final figure in the LHS might be slightly higher or slightly lower than that. I think it was 34 social rented houses we had. So again, we take on board things like how much money HSP have got, what the waiting lists are showing and things like that to get a figure. But it'll be around about that area. And you're right enough, it can be updated. We can run the model almost any time we want. So we'll probably do it after the first year to see how things are going. And then maybe after 2 years or 3 years as well. So it'll be an ongoing rolling process of checking out the housing need. And obviously your own waiting list will change from year to year as well, so we can take account of that as well. But the stage we're at the moment is to get like an on-paper figure, and we'll develop that over the next few months with yourselves to come up with an actual figure for building.
And what sort of stage is the LHS at the moment? Is it complete now?
No, we've come up with broad themes. This is the part of the consultation we're doing just now. We've got the 4 themes, as I mentioned, and we've got up to 8 actions within each theme. That's part of the consultation process to see what people think. Do they think that that's the right approach we're taking, or should we amend it in some way? So we're going to finish the consultation now in March, isn't it? I think it is. And then Isabel's going to start writing frantically between March and June. We hope to go to the council in June with a working draft. And if it's approved by the council, then it'll get submitted to the Scottish Government. And then it gets quality assured and peer reviewed and whatnot.
It's a very prescribed process in the LHS. There is Scottish Government guidance that we have to follow. The first major step in it is the housing need and demand assessment that Ian's talking about, using the hardware, the software tool. And that document, it has to look at the whole housing system, everything that's going on, private sector housing, housing quality, etc. And the calculation, if you like, is only one part of that. But the whole document has to be assessed by Scottish Government. They've got a unit called the Centre for Housing Market Analysis, and you have to submit your needs assessment there, and they appraise it. And that's where we're at the moment. They have their document, and we're waiting for feedback from them. Only after they have ticked it off as robust and credible can we actually use it as the evidence base for the final LHS. So at the moment, while that is being appraised, we're moving on with the consultation based on the draft priorities of housing supply, housing quality, homelessness and independent living. And as I said, we are dependent on HHP to help us achieve those. In particular, the homelessness one, aspirations to increase options in independent living, and the supply, affordable housing supply element of that particular chapter. But there is a long way to go with it, because we do need to have serious discussions about what the housing supply target will be. Once our baseline figure is actually approved, then we need to sit with everyone and look at a whole range of factors. What's the capacity in the construction industry, for example? Is there a skills shortage? What funding are various partners going to have to come to the table? And all sorts of things. What type of housing? What size of housing? Should we have more shared equity? Should we be thinking about shared equity in the rural areas, in Uist River? We've only tried it around Stornoway area at the moment. And really, quite surprisingly, the last housing need and demand assessment, the conclusion then was that shared equity housing had a very, very limited part to play, and that was why we were really very cautious, I think, in the approach to it. But the slump and the mortgage difficulties that we've experienced over the last few years has reversed that trend, and so we see that there's possibly potential for a lot more shared equity in the years to come within the housing programme, and again potentially to spread that over other areas of the islands. The other thing is issues about the size of units that are developed, bearing in mind all of the welfare reform agenda and benefit sanctions and benefit caps that are likely to be introduced. But there's a whole mix of things still to be sort of talked through before we really come to any final conclusions on this.
Given that there's about, the really quite serious nature of the quality of our private housing that has come from the survey that we carried out as a council, is it possible at all that the government would recognise that as somewhere that they need to invest in? But I mean, at the moment, my feeling is that we will never, ever, 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 ever overcome that particular problem. At one point we had, I think, something like 8,000 houses that required attention, and we're only managing to do a relatively small number each year. So is there any chance they would look at that?
I think we've got no confidence that that will ever be looked at again, because it would take a reversal of legislation, because it was legislation which changed the old grant system and sort of introduced the principle that homeowners should be responsible for the maintenance of their own properties, and that public funds shouldn't be used to increase the value of private assets. And yes, you can understand the logic of it, but the reality on the islands were that the fabric of a lot of our housing stock was poor to begin with, because it was individual self-build. An awful lot of stock was built before the building standards, regulations and so on were as stringent as they are now. And the correlate over the years, I think, recognised that it was much more important to preserve the properties and preserve people in their own homes and on the island, and it was an investment in farming. But then, as you know, the legislation was changed, and in a way to force the council's hand in this, the money from Scottish Government, they moved the ring fence, and then year by year the actual allocation was reduced. And so unless there was some injection of extra capital into the programme and the council was able to prioritise that, then I don't see us being able to make any great inroads. We'll never go back to the level of repair grants and so on that we had before.
One of the things we are looking at, or suggesting in the NHS, is this thing called equity release, where a homeowner, if they paid off the mortgage, they take out some equity in the property and use that money to improve the property. It's been piloted in a few places around the country. It's very common in south of the border in England, but we're not quite sure how to work up here. When the grant regime changed 5 years ago, one of the suggested resolutions to that from the Scottish Government was equity release. And we told people who came to us for grants for windows or doors, sorry, there's no money available, but have you tried equity release? And most people were horrified, saying, no, I've spent all my life paying off my mortgage, I don't want another financial burden on my neck. But we've had to bite the bullet, and we're considering putting that in the NHS as one way of getting people to do the work in the house. Because from the survey that I mentioned, there is going to be quite a lot of investment needed in the private side of things over the next 10 to 15 years. And if it doesn't go to the houses, then you're going to get more people coming to the council's homeless or end up managing HSP's waiting list. So it's going to assume on that one how the private sector deals with the condition.
That's what I was thinking, that I mean, it's largely single and elderly couples who are living in these properties. And the chances are that they are going to get to a point where they are not going to be able to live in these properties, so they're going to come looking for accommodation. Now they'll look to HHP to provide it to some extent, so that puts a further pressure on your housing stock. Or alternatively, they're going to look for care or packages of some kind or another, and at the moment we can't deal with that. So it would be in fact a positive investment to actually make these houses habitable.
It would be, because I think we sort of flagged up the risk over several years now that we are in danger of coming full circle back to the late 70s, 80s, where there was a high demand for sheltered housing, and it wasn't because of people's care needs, it was because of the condition of their own homes, and the alternative to trying to do something to repair that house, bring it back to a decent standard, was just to move out and into a comfortable, rebuild, sheltered house. And that was where the big programme of sheltered housing sort of originated at that time. And then we saw over the years, because the grant availability came back up, that people would prefer to stay in their own homes, in their own communities. A lot of people, because of the income levels and so on here, did get 100% grants. They were available, and so the housing stock in the private sector quality came back up, and people were able to stay there, and they were able to get home care packages and so on, which happened. But we have been flagging up ever since the grant system changed that there was a danger over time of us coming right back round to people looking for rented housing as an alternative.
But just on that point, I think one of the themes that has come out on the Our Islands Our Future was looking at the Scottish Government giving one pot of funding to the council, and for the council to determine where that's spent. So if it made more sense that 30,000 was invested in a home to keep someone in their own home rather than us having to build one at an extortionate cost, then that's a decision that could be taken by the council. So the slice of the pie how it's allocated would be determined about where you would see the need. So that's, as far as I know, that's going into Our Islands Our Future, and we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. But that would certainly address some of that if it happened. Any other questions?
It's not a question, it seems that it's a wonderful opportunity to shape the place together. But I'm curious to know what the vision is for the Western Isles, for the whole of the Western Isles, because there's quite a lot of strategic work at the moment in terms of a housing strategy, regeneration plan, the Port Authority and so on, and just how those visions collaborate to create a place that we want to live in and shape together. That's a big kind of question, but I think it's quite important because it's where do we hook all these documents, this work, this action, these strategic visions. They need to get behind something, and I struggle to find what that something is sometimes, because as we know, fantastic resources throughout the islands, people and the assets and the development trusts and so on. But how we can actually pull that together to create that for the next generation and beyond.
Yeah, that's really a key role of the community planning partnership, because it is important that we're all facing the same direction. I think that's what I was saying earlier, and that's the biggest challenge, is that we do all get on the same page, and that we're not wasting effort fighting against each other or taking up positions, but that we do recognise that if there is to be a future, a long-term future in the islands, then we all need to get behind that. And one of the things that had been discussed at the Community Planning Partnership was us all buying into whatever the vision is, that we take ownership of it in our organisations and say that that's what we're going to buy into. So if it was, I think the example was, if it was our islands, our future, it would be our homes, our future, or our education, our future, or our health, our future, so that there was that common thread, whatever it is. That was just an example, that whatever it is, that thread was there, and that we were all saying, yes, we've all bought into this, that it's not about the council saying it's their responsibility just for our islands, our future, but it's all of us. And that's really where the Community Planning Partnership comes in, to make sure that happens. And I think the more people that articulate what you've said very well, and say it in forums where it's heard and taken ownership of, the better, and the more likelihood there is that things will change. Because they need to.
It's going to, it needs courage as well, and some risk, I think, and you know, a kind of innovation and a visionary approach, really.
I think that's what at our business planning day, that's what our chair laid out for us, that there is going to have to be an element of risk that all the organisations take, and you have to balance that with making sure you don't take too much, that you put people's homes at risk, but that you, in order to secure it for the future, that you have to take an element of risk as well. And I think you've got a council coming on board in May, so that's going to be a huge challenge for them, I think, to pull all of that together and to make it a difference.
I'm ready for it.
Good. Are you standing for council? Maybe you should. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, can I just thank Isabel and Ian and Donald and John for their contributions, and yourselves for giving up your time to come along tonight. And hopefully it's been beneficial, and that you can take the message out to the rest of your colleagues, and that we will see a change taking place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.